But let's go to Acts 9:11. And real quickly, we have about 15 minutes. I want to start showing you some of the interpretational helps that biblical archaeology gives us. Acts chapter 9, verse 11. And the Lord said to him, "Arise," Acts 9:11, "and go to the street called Straight." Oh, so he just typed into his smartphone, Straight, you know? That's the name of a street, right? Like Elm, Pine, Washington Avenue, go to Straight Street. Well, and you know what? There's really no doctrinal implications of knowing what straight means. But there are a lot of practical applications of knowing what it means. The street called Straight, what would that mean, if anything? Without digging down to that time, we don't really know. But what you find when you dig is it was the main street of the Roman world. They were all the Straight Street. Every city had one of these streets. They were the main north and south axis of the street. In fact, Alexander started this. Alexander started laying out cities with a ducomanus, a street that went this way, east and west, and a cardo that went north and south. So the big straight street was called the cardo, and it was on a north-south crossing an east-west, and usually where they met was the agora, the marketplace of the city. And so when they were going to this, the word straight is actually the word cardo. It's the Greek word for heart. You ever heard of we're going into the heart of the city? That is Alexander's, when he Hellenized, when he made civilization spread out from Greece all the way to India, he started telling the cities they need to have this structure. And so by the time following Alexander's time, the Roman Empire, so going to the straight street means Paul went to the main street, the largest, most, the boulevard of Damascus. Now, let's go to Matthew 8:28, because I want to show you how this affects our understanding. I think a lot of times when we think of Jesus, we think of kind of the Jesus video, that most of his ministry was about around those people. They're almost barefooted. They're kind of bumpkins. They're kind of like West Virginia, hillbilly, Jed Clampett kind of things. But look at Matthew 8 and verse 28, and it says, "And when he'd come to the other side, the country of the Gergesenes, there met him 2 demon-possessed men." Gergesene was a region that was dominated by a main city, Gerasa, or Jerash, okay? There's Jerash today. Now, this is how much dirt. You can see this hill. All of this stuff you see was in those layers, of all the civilization. But the archaeologists have dug up this place where you're looking at this city that dominated this region in Matthew 8:28. And look at the forest of columns. Now that maybe doesn't mean much to you, but now you look at it from a different angle. This is where the 2 streets met. This is where the ducomanus crosses the cardo. Look what's in the center. This is the marketplace of the city. This is the agora. You might know it by the Roman name. They called it the forum. Okay, the forum equaled the marketplace, equaled the Greek word, which you might see sometimes, the agora. So these 3 interchangeable terms were for the heart of the city that would be very much the place you would want to go if you wanted to get a message out. And so right here, this little strip right there is what we were looking at from the other slide. Now we'll look at it from another angle. Look, this is that forest of, now you can see all these modern Arab homes, that this is in the city of Jordan, which used to be the tribe of Manasseh in the biblical times. But this city this is what the cities look like in the time of Christ. That's not in those Jesus movies. We're talking about millions of people, Hundreds of thousands. That's how you could get one group he fed. When he had 5,000, that was 5,000 men who probably had their wife with them, probably had their 2 or 3 kids. We're talking about 20,000 people at a pop. You have to have quite a metropolitan, quite a wide group of population to get 20,000 people off work to come to an event during the day. You know what I mean? So we're talking about large cities, and this is the Cardo, this main road, and then it would keep going this way. Now we're in this marketplace, and this is just very, very similar layout to all these cities. But you say, oh, well, that's in Jordan, and how do we know Jesus ever went there? Well, we don't. He didn't. He got back on the boat. He didn't go there. And most of them had these triumphal arches at the end. Incredible architecture. Most of them, this is right off. If you went back here to this big plaza, if you walk up these steps that you're looking down, we're actually on top of the hill looking down, this is what you're looking at. This is the stairway. All those are stairs. And this is just the base of a massive temple that went way up about 100 feet higher, that was to the love goddess, Artemis, the goddess that they worshipped with all of their different worship. This is unbelievable, the structural size of these things that was right on, I don't know if you can see it, but there's a person standing right there. Look at they're not even up to the bottom of this column, which is about 60 to 80 feet tall. Those columns are only on the deck before you get up to the real thing. They had some pretty amazing buildings back then. Now, right off of this where we're standing is this plaza. This is the bathhouses. In this ancient world, there were a lot of public baths with running water. And you would take your bath, the toilets were there. It's just civilization. Amazing. Now it's all fallen down, but it's amazing. Okay, now turn to Matthew 4:25, because, this has all been a nice travelogue, but has nothing to do with the Bible because Jesus was never there. Okay, now look at Matthew 4:25. And it says, great multitudes followed him from Galilee and from Decapolis. Now all of a sudden, one of the Decapolis cities, that city you just saw, Jerash is the name of it, that's in Jordan. This Decapolis city is in Israel. What I'm going to show you right now, Jesus would have seen. Now see, this ruins the Jesus video, because when you see the civilization, here's the city down here of the time of Christ. This is where King Saul's body was nailed to the wall. This is the Old Testament city. This is the New Testament city, okay? Unbelievable. Now, if I can get my writing to go away, I want to just show you some of the stuff that's here. This is the Cardo. This is the Forum area, or the Agora. This is the Ducomanis, going this way. All of this are the bathhouses. This is a gigantic, you can't see it, but a theater that seats several thousand people. And they haven't even, this city, and you can see there's the columns of the Ducomanis, the east-west one going this way. This city is called the Disney World of the Holy Land. It's always a stop whenever you go over to Israel, Bet Shan. But this city shows us how civilized the Holy Land was in the first century. Another view, here's the theater I told you about right there. Here's the Cardo. There are the baths over here. Here's the Forum. Do you remember when we were studying redemption? The word for redemption is the word agora. So this is the agora. This is the marketplace where slaves were sold. and redemption is to be bought out of the agora. And so when Jesus talked about redemption, they all knew about slaves. Every town in that agora sold slaves. Every town. There were more slaves than citizens in the Roman Empire. And so when Jesus talked about redemption, he was talking about something that everyone, the picture just was vivid in their mind. Now this is called Palladius Street right here. This is still in this Decapolis town of Bet-Shean. Do you see this? This is a raised, kind of like a little raise in the road. That's the sewer system. They had storm sewers. They had hot and cold running water. This is just the colonnade, so you'd have shade. This is another angle, the big bathhouses over there, the big theater here. There's that storm drain going right down the middle. You say, well, where's the rest of it? Well, they don't want to knock everybody's house down. It's there. It's just huge. This city is huge. It fell down, by the way, in the great earthquake of the 8th century A.D. You know what this is? This is an amphitheater. Now, most people would call this, it wouldn't understand the difference between an amphitheater and a theater. A theater only is a half of a circle. An amphitheater is around. It's both sides. Just half of it is a theater. This is an amphitheater. It's round. People sat all the way around. This is an arena where they martyred Christians. At least 1,000 we know of from church history died in those sands in Bet-Shean in the 1st century in the early church. And it was a big city. But Medeba is a town in Jordan where on the floor of a church they found this mosaic. In 500 AD, during the Byzantine time, the Roman Empire in the east side, and all of a sudden, archaeologists looked at this, they found it, in the 1800s AD, and they could read, this is Ha-Jerusalem, that's the city of Jerusalem, and they said, Jerusalem has a cardo? This is the cardo, the main north and south drag. Nobody knew Jerusalem had a cardo in 1800. And so somebody looked at this and they said, wow. And so they started digging down in Jerusalem. And here are more pictures. That is the Medeba map. It's just, it wasn't just of Jerusalem. They have found all of these sites from the early church on this mosaic. This was like a AAA office, The maps were a little heavier. They weren't made of paper. They were made of tile. It's unbelievable, everything there. But this is what Jerusalem looked like now they found out, in the Byzantine times, the post early church era. There's the north-south drag, there's the east-west drag, and all these churches now that was on this map, they have found. But let's go to Matthew 8:20, because none of that I said has anything to do with the Bible. It's just interesting. But look at Matthew 8:20. And Jesus said to him, remember verse 19, the scribe says, hey, I'll go with you everywhere you go. In verse 20, Jesus said, foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. You know what Jesus said? He says, I don't have a home. I don't even own a home. And those people that were hassling Jesus all the way through his ministry, as they started excavating Jerusalem, they found all of these first century roads that are underneath, some of them 20 feet or more, 40 feet, under the surface of modern-day Jerusalem. They have found the first century roads King Herod built. In fact, in July, they just opened a section. There's a road that goes from the city of David, the Pool of Siloam, underneath all of the Muslim homes, and it comes up at the Western Wailing Wall. And you can walk underground on a road that Herod built, underneath all of this modern excavation or city, and you're 40, 50, 60 feet underground, which is how much the debris is piled up over the years. And it comes out right here at what's called the Wailing Wall, and it's just a continuation of a road that goes all the way up to the Damascus Gate. But this is a little piece of it. This is the column structure. It had covering. They've put it together to show you. By the way, above us are all the Jewish houses. This is underneath the Jewish quarter because the Muslims won't let them dig underneath their parts, or they'll riot if they do. And so the Jews are allowing all of the under their homes to be dug out, and they're finding all the first century level. In fact, you can even shop. This is called the Cardo. This is the Cardo. This is the actual first century road, and it's all full of Jewish shops. You can eat down there and everything, and the whole city's above you. And it's like you're down in the time of Christ, and it's a fascinating thing to be there. But what I'm bringing you to is this. This is a house they found under there. This house has 6,000 square feet. This has an indoor swimming pool. How many of you have one of those? I bet not very many. An indoor swimming pool, a 6,000 square foot house with, they even found the table and all of the different plates and serving things and everything. These things are imported from all over the world. China, not the city of China, but they had China that was brought in from far reaches of the Roman Empire. You say, what's so big about that? Look back at chapter 8, verse 20. Jesus was alluding to the fact that he lived a very simple, poor life. They were going home to their indoor pools. This is inside the old city of Jerusalem. This house, people were living in there that heard Jesus teach in the temple. And when the destruction of the Romans came, the Romans started the city on fire and everything fell. In fact, the house next door, it's grisly, but the people are still, their bones are still there, and they're trying to get their jewels and treasures, and the house burned and fell on them. And you can even find one woman had her makeup in her hand. Her I don't know, lipstick or something. It's still inside the container, and she's holding it. Can you imagine if the house was burning? Would you run in and get your makeup? Probably really needed it for some reason. Real quickly, one last thing, and we're going to go with this. We have a minute. If you go to Acts 16, Paul is beaten in Philippi with rods. In chapter 16, verse 40, the next day, after being beaten till you could see the bones, in Acts 16:40, he starts walking. Acts 17:1, Paul walks 97 miles. That's how far it is from Philippi to Thessalonica. When he writes back in 1 Thessalonians 2, 1 through 4, Paul defends his reliability. He says, I'm not unclean, I'm not dishonest, I'm not a crook. Why would he say that? Well, I want you to see something. Every town had a bathhouse, like this over here. If Paul walked into Thessalonica, he would have gone to a public bath. And when Paul went to that public bath, he would have taken his cloak off and he would have hung it up on a hook, and he would have taken his tunic off, and everyone, as he hung up his tunic, there would have been a collective gasp. His back looked like the lines on a steak, after being on the grill. You know how it sears in those marks? That's what Paul looked like after being beaten in Philippi. And every time he took a bath, which is what normal people that weren't kings had to go to a bathhouse. This is where you used the toilet and you took a bath. And if you're a good Jew, you did both quite frequently. And every time he went in there and hooked his clothes, there are only two people that got beaten like he was: runaway slaves and convicts. And so Paul entered his ministry walking down streets like this, going into bathhouses like that, and Paul would experience people not understanding why he'd been beaten.